steering wheel. Lots of steering wheel, yeah. Give him steering wheel. Hey, steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to him. Come on! Whoa!
Your leg, my please. Your leg.
How the f*** is that possible?
I'm driving like a grandma. Get that, Ralph? Did you hear me? From our radio, the rest of the race. Ralph, acknowledge. Now, come on, close him down and kill him. We've got a lunatic on the track down that interstate.
Hello and welcome back inside the Part for May for podcast number 905. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camera. You know what we happen to do on race weekends? You know what we do.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
Of course that's what we do. And tonight I have to get someone that actually knows what they're talking about and bring in my co-host.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
So I got to say up front, folks, that Paul was penalized and he served his community service this past weekend. He served his community service. The FIA made him invite me over to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and
Yes,
Paul,
charitable.
Yeah, very charitable. And Paul let me just follow him around like a lost puppy dog, and he would throw me a few treats. And he totally served his community service, and it was an amazing experience. If some of you followed us on social media, saw some pictures and stuff that we posted. So it was the IMSA race, Battle on the Bricks at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, a 6-hour race for the IMSA series and the GT program. Paul and the Heart of Racing and Ian James, incredibly grateful to both you and the entire team for letting me loiter around, take pictures, and it was just fantastic to understand, podcasting isn't my day job. I have a day job. I could probably take Paul to where we do all the stuff we do and it fry his brain. But it was great to see what Paul does for a day job and how Paul earns a living and how that team operates. It was amazing. I got to Paul allowed me to go to the meetings and strategy meetings and hang out with the drivers and just hear how the team communicates with each other, how they operate. It was amazing. And then I got to tell on Paul because this is awesome. So down in the pit lane, Paul took me down on Saturday, and I got to listen to the headset and kind of listen what the team was saying and other teams and stuff like that. And that was kind of cool. But I wanted to hear what Paul actually listened to during a race, right? So I didn't want to bother him. I was trying to stay out of his hair, but I snuck down the pit lane. I walked past, Paul DeResta and Roman Grosjean and all the other teams. And Roman Grosjean and I are like this. And so I walked down to the pit lane and I go in, and there was a headset there that Hannah Grisham was polite enough it was hers and to let me use. And I put the headset on just to listen. So Paul, imagine this. This is because I'm a layperson. And if you were me, a layperson, and didn't do this for a living, this is how you would experience it too. So you put this headset on and all you hear, imagine, the only way I can describe this is imagine that you're at some big social event with like 100 and some people, and it's loud, it's cacophonous, and you put it on and you have to listen, and you can hear every single conversation in that room going on at the same time in your ear, because that's what it was like listening to what Paul listens to. So, Paul, you were listening to your own team, your own intra-team communication between engineers, mechanics.
Correct. Yeah, because we've got two cars running, so they're communicating with each other, and I'm listening to both of them communicate with themselves. Yeah.
Right. And then you're listening to not only the intra team, and you're listening to the pit to car to pit. So you're listening to the drivers to each of their teams. Yep. And then you're listening to all of the other teams' radio communications.
Well, no, I used to listen to more. Now as the championship wore on,
it's just those you were fighting.
I listen to the ones we're fighting too. Yeah. Yeah. At the beginning of the year, I have basically 4 teams I picked from when we ran in GTD and Pro that we were probably good competitors. And then I narrowed it down. Obviously, now the pro car is literally in a fight for the championship versus a couple other cars, and so I kind of focused on that to help me focus on the important stuff as much as I can.
Yeah. So then he's got that. So let's say the top 4 teams that are in competition with him for the 23 car. But this weekend, he also had the 27 car. So he had 2 cars in there in GTD Pro or GT Pro. And then he was listening to IMSA's Master Race Radio.
Yeah.
And this is the people that tell all the teams, penalty, drive through, all that. Spin on such and such, yellow, that kind of thing. I put that on it. Now, I know Paul's voice and I know Ian's voice, and I could hear them. Everyone else didn't have a clue who I was listening to. There's a driver saying this or that, and I thought it was his driver. No, it was one of the other teams. I have no idea what was going on. But it was amazing just to watch you guys execute that. And it's a crazy race if anybody watched it across all the classes, really. But with that starting on dry and right after you start, the rain comes, strategy's out the window, and then it's just insane. But it was eye-opening just to get insight into how an IMSA team operates, and just amazing stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a privilege to be able to let you in, I mean, it's stuff I love. I love it, every minute of it, and to open the door and let someone in to see it, because I think it's magical sometimes.
It is,
You're talking about the strategies and the driver feedbacks and all that stuff. Is I'm still a racing fan like anybody else. Sometimes sitting there, man, well, this is pretty cool. Oh, it's my turn to speak. Oh, right, okay,
right. Yeah.
So no, it's cool that the way we got it set up. Got some very smart people at the team, and
that is for sure.
I like listening to them speak half the time. I learn a lot. I've been doing this for a while now, but you never stop learning every week. And that everyone's pretty open to, hey, if I don't understand thing, I'll just go up and ask them, why did you say that, or what did you say? And then that makes me better for what I'm doing, especially when I'm on the pit wall and I'm seeing a strategy evolve that maybe someone hasn't thought of. All the things, as much as I pick their brain, it helps me try and come to a conclusion that, okay, is this worth something, or are they thinking about something else? And so it's
amazing.
The race day's busy.
The strategy that that Tad worked on, or Nate, or whatever, and just how they just see numbers, and how they can translate numbers to strategy on the track. And I mean, it's just super impressed with both of them. And I spent more time with Tad than Nate, but Tad's just amazing.
He is an amazing person. Very open person. Open and calm to help. He's more than happy to just describe everything. Why is this? Oh, okay, here you go. He's very patient.
Very patient guy. We take that in that role. But great race. And folks, there's one more race left, the Petit Le Mans Road Atlanta, and you can catch that. Was that in 2 weeks?
No, it's in 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah. Middle of October.
Yeah. So that comes down. That's it. And Paul's team is second in the championship.
Yeah.
So they're racing and fighting the number 77 AO Racing.
The
team.
little green dinosaur car. But so we're about 100 points behind, and there's 350 points to win the race. So obviously there's a chance.
Yep.
But they've got the upper hand right now. For sure.
Yeah. So very, very, very cool. Had a great time. Indy was great. Everybody was accommodating and everything. So a lot of fun. And there is a Formula One tie-in to this. Because, I know everybody's like, get to the show.
This is the show.
This is the show, folks. And there is a Formula One tie-in. I had no idea, but I'm sitting there, and I didn't want to pester him because it's a race weekend. He's busy. He's trying to drive for a championship, and I don't want to bug him.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting there with Ross Gunn, who is one of the Mercedes AMG Petronas Formula One simulation guys that does a lot of the sim work for Toto and team. And, I could have spent a couple hours talking to him about this sim and all of that just to find out. So Paul and his team, Ian and Paul, at the Heart of Racing, have Mercedes F1 simulator guy on their team driving. So
that's right.
That's the Formula One tie-in there. So
there you go.
It's very cool. Nice guy, though. Seems like a hell of a race car driver, too.
Hell of a race car driver.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, great guy. So you can see, in 3 weeks' time, Mercedes F1 simulator driver Ross Gunn at the wheel of the Heart of Racing Aston Martin at Petit Le Mans, going for the championship. So
going for the championship.
Yep. So in if that wasn't enough, Paul and I did manage to get the Singapore Grand Prix watched.
We did,
and we made notes in its entirety. Yes, we did, and we're going to talk about that now, shall we? Ready, set, go. All right, so. Let's do a little formation lap up front. While I do like the idea of this track and a few of its corners, and I totally recognize that it's a challenging circuit, no doubt about that, it doesn't always produce the best racing, let's be honest. I mean, unless you're dragging a fuel rig halfway down pit lane like Massa did, or maybe purposely crashing to let Alonso win. Those are dramatic moments for Singapore. But apart from that, it's not known. I guess it's kind of known for producing some pedestrian racing, and this weekend probably not a big difference there. It was a pretty straightforward affair, although there were some interesting elements that were happening even within that race. Even they added another DRS zone, and even that, it struggled to really offer a lot more passing opportunities, even with that additional DRS zone. So I am not quite sure how they could rethink this. Other than and maybe a different track layout. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, we talked about this in the pre a little bit.
Yeah,
might come up a little later. Is a lot of it has to do with that everyone's kind of running their strategy for a very long race, and they're waiting on a yellow to try and get a quick cheap pit stop.
Yep.
But for the most part, they trundle around burning off fuel for half the race. I mean, I think it's not necessarily that DRS zones don't work. It's that no one's really going for it because they're all just trying to take care of their tires. I mean, think how, Yuki, is like, I killed my tires, running behind. I mean, it's like one little thing can kill your tires, and then your strategy is messed up. So I feel like they need to shorten the race, make every lap count that little bit more. Obviously, they basically set these race lengths up by how much fuel the car's going to burn. They try to make it the same from one race to one race to one race. That's why Monza's so short, because they're full throttle for so long. The fuel burns, and they're done. So I think if they could shorten the race, the cars could start off lighter. They'd be less stressed on, taking the sheen off the tire and just being a duck out there. So I don't know. It's one way, one thing to look at. Plus, obviously, if it's a pedestrian race and it lasts twice as long as every other race, not exactly a fan favorite either. Maybe they should. I could see a sprint race going on here. They didn't do one here, did they? Why not?
No, they could do a sprint race here. That actually might be more exciting than their actual race. Maybe that's why they didn't done it.
Or just take a sprint race length off of the actual race of the race and make it a two-parter on the weekend. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, 2 sprint races, and your aggregate, is the race. Yeah. Despite that, the oppressive heat and humidity makes it very difficult for the drivers, and it's like being in a steam room sauna for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Imagine getting all suited up and your Nomax and sitting in a sauna for 2 hours. That's about it. I think brutal. The drivers. Yeah. They say they can lose anywhere like 3 kilograms of body weight. And that's, what is that, 6 pounds in old money? Yes. So,
It's a ton. Yeah.
It's a lot. And I was intrigued also, Paul, by George Russell's comments over the weekend, the inconsistency between the sets of tires. And Sky even said that other teams were mentioning that too. And George would say it's just the inconsistency, as Sky put it, was, they have, for the session, maybe in practice or in quali or whatever, 2 sets of softs. And the inconsistency just between those two sets of softs was pretty dramatic. And I don't recall them ever being that outspoken in all of the other races this season as they were here. So I don't know if that was a tarmac, heat, the compounds they brought issue, why there would be inconsistencies. And then I thought, well, maybe Mercedes was being the most vocal about it. Maybe it's more of a Mercedes issue than others, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It could be a combination of all those, right? I mean, we've seen it in the past. As you're right, we haven't heard of it recently. Where certainly when they started bringing in the high deg tire, they were so different from one to the one. The teams didn't know what they were going to put on their car next,
right?
So, and that's a Pirelli manufacturing thing. Maybe these sets of tires are built on Friday, right before a holiday. Who knows?
Yeah, right.
It could be a combination of both. There was a lot of talk about the surface and how that works over here, and it's obviously a unique surface they don't get to test on either.
Yeah. So let's start at the sharp end. We'll start with McLaren and Lando Norris.
Oh,
Jesus. Lando Norris, P1, Oscar Piastri, P3. Very clear from Friday onward that Lando was going to be the guy to beat. And that only really solidified come Saturday with his pole position. He just looked planted in that car. The car looked great, looked to respond to whatever minor changes they made to that car in Lando's hands. He was just 10 tenths all weekend long. Lando dominated the race, and the only thing that really threatened him was himself. He touched the wall barely a couple of times, and I'm thinking an inch or so more, that would have been race over for him. And it was, interesting to see that happen. Now, there's been a lot of discussion since that race I've seen online on this small point of touching the wall. And a lot of people saying, you're out 20 seconds in the lead, 25 seconds in the lead, or whatever it was. You get to going around a long track like that, it's easy to lose focus on that. I'm more inclined to think that there was something else going on by kind of what his engineer radioed. He said, hey, take a drink and stay focused, right? And and which some drivers don't like to drink during the race. And in the post-race interview with David Coulthard with DC, he said you could just tell all the drivers are just profusely sweating. They're knackered, right? And Lando's, no different. And he's standing there for the interview and made the comment to DC that he felt lightheaded. And so you and I talked about it when we were at Indy, and I said, that's kind of what he said. To that point, Paul, you get in there, you're in the Nomex, you're in like a sauna for 2 hours, you've sweated out 3 kilograms of body weight. Dehydration's a real factor when it comes down to the human condition in that, and that could be a serious element here. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, back to the IMSA race, Ross had to do like 3-something hours straight in a row, which was unideal. It was just how the strategy worked out. But it's tough. It's tough, and it's not a weakness of a driver. I mean, it's all about preparation, but I'm not sure you can get prepared enough to not come out of that race being just completely drained and dehydrated. It's hard to say. I mean, I think the two-track layout is easier for drivers to stay focused, because the old style track, I felt I hated it, honestly, because it was a very stop-start track where you couldn't build a flow up. This one's the latest version is a lot more flowy, which helps when you're doing a long stint and driving for a long time and you're hot. It helps you get in the groove. That groove will kind of carry you through some of those moments when you might have, a little bit of lapse of judgment. But, it was later in his stint. He was trying to push for his in-lap, probably didn't need to. Sometimes when you're in those modes, you push because you need to stay focused on something, and made an error, right? I mean, that could have been disastrous. I don't like that ability to make that kind of mistake in that kind of position that he was in. He's got to work on that, because that shouldn't happen. We have seen it. Even Senna did it, right? Senna did it at Monaco. He had a 25-second lead, and he threw it all away. And
So it does happen to the best of them for sure, but it's definitely something you need to learn as to why that happened, and how to not let that back in as a potential error.
Yeah.
And the team needs to, and we weren't listening to Norris the whole time, but the team also needs to stay engaged in these kind of races. As I think it was it Russell said, "Hey, I need some encouragement here."
Yeah.
Because you do need to keep interacting. There's a time when you need to sit back and let the driver drive, but there's also, or to Yuki, then you got to play both ends, right? Yuki's like, "You're talking too much," but
it's too much information.
You do need to jump in every now and again just to make them sure everyone's still out there or ready for you. Yeah. George is like, give me some meaningful data. Where am I? What am I doing? Who am I racing? Yeah. What day is it?
Yeah. How are the laps? So how's the car look? Something.
Right. I always like people talking to me, but everyone, it has to be right.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be at the right time. You can even joke on the radio if you like. But it just has to be appropriate. So
yeah, otherwise you get the Yuki response. That's too much information.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean you don't want that. I mean you end up with Alonso going,
No more radio. The rest of the race.
That's
yeah. I mean the big key as a driver, you're focusing, and you can the straights are short, right?
Yeah.
The corners are kind of demanding, and you have to be focused. So whatever communications need to come have to be short and sweet. And that's kind of what Yuki was alluding to.
Yeah.
It's like, it wasn't really too much information. It's like, I can't focus on someone speaking a long sentence while driving a Formula One car around, right?
Right. Yeah. It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
Now that we're like back to back, I just real quick before we get to Oscar is back to back with Baku. You feel like Singapore, more flow, better flowy track.
Yeah.
Looks a little more challenging than what Baku does, and you think that's a better layout for the circuit than Baku?
Yeah, I think. Yeah. I mean, I don't think Baku's horrible. It's kind of unique in its own little way. The little castle section didn't bother me too much, but but versus the old Singapore, I think it's a lot better version of it. How to make it racy, I mean, you got to have these tight hairpins followed by straightaways, not by kinks.
Yeah,
because that just makes it even harder.
Yeah, right. Let's see. Oscar Piastri dropped down to 6 on the opening lap, having been pushed wide, but he did make it back past Hülkenberg, ran that long first stint, and some suggested, Paul, that they left him out too long, but I kind of went back later and watched that a little bit. I think really getting stuck behind those Mercedes would have negated, any better result from him in the long run, in my mind. I think that, he got around him, which is great.
He was never going to catch Max, right? So.
I don't think so.
No.
Once he got back, once he got behind those Mercedes, he had to work through them. I don't know that it would have made any difference in the long run, but he did get back, fought back to third. So I think it was a great performance from he and Lando. Oscar, once he boxed, he put on the fresh tires. He worked his way back to the podium. Good result for Oscar, although overshadowed by Lando on the balance of the weekend. But Lando was just operating at a different level. And that radio call, Paul, was very Max-esque, if you will, when they radioed and said, yeah, okay, well, let's just put 5 seconds on Max and cover the undercut, shall we? And Lando was like, oh, okay. And he put like 7, 8, 10 seconds on him. It was like, whoa. That's like what Red Bull used to do, right? And I wonder, I think I saw a headline. I haven't read the article. It said, Christian said that he thought McLaren was taking the piss because they showed their real pace, when they pulled out that big of a gap and that amount of time.
As you say, Red Bull have done that for a long time.
Yeah.
When they had it in hand,
right.
Not so much right now.
Right,
Yeah.
Shouldn't be a shock. But having said that, Lando certainly in the pocket looked great. But Oscar, I think, had a really good recovery back up to P3. It was a good drive.
Yeah, no, it was a good drive. I was thinking, are they kind of like switching out being really good at one track versus another? I mean, obviously we saw the thing at Monza where they were side by side, but it seems like on certain weekends, one of them is the pick for the weekend versus the other one, rather than they're just both on top of each other. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you remember like at Zandvoort with Lando, one that just dominant,
Yeah, and then Baku with
Baku
Piastri.
With Piastri,
It just seems that they're not fighting together; they're fighting alternating, or whatever the pattern. I don't know if it's a real pattern or not. It just kind of occurred to me that they're on that. They're the driver and car that weekend,
right?
On the McLaren side.
Right. It's kind of like Checo just showing up at Baku for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Red Bull, let's talk about them. You had Sergio Perez down in P10, Max Verstappen in P2. I think Red Bull came to Singapore trying to figure, not only were they nursing their current woes, which they are, but I think they also tried to attempt to cure what it was that really hurt them last year at Singapore.
Yeah.
You remember last year, all that curb strike was really messing the car up. They couldn't keep the car and the aero working once they go over those curbs. It'd lift the aero out, and they were struggling. So in Friday, it seemed like maybe they were working on that. And then one presumes they were running a config on Friday that would make it a little more Singapore friendly, if you will. But then they ended up making it was really nowhere. They were really struggling on Friday, but then they ended up on Saturday free practice, and come Saturday they made significant changes to that car. Then it started to look more hooked up, and certainly in the hands of Max. And then he qualifies in second place, still off the pace, but still in second place, which was good. Max set off, had a good start, managed to stay ahead of Lewis, which I think was important because Lewis was on softs. He never really had the pace to challenge Lando, and Lando simply, as I mentioned, just pulled out the time he needed to negate the possible undercut for Max, so that was never really in the cards for them. So they finished in P2, which if you were to say that Lando did exactly what he needed to do for his championship challenge, I would argue that Red Bull and Max did exactly what they needed to do for damage limitation, right? And so I think it's hard to, they'd like to win, but I think on balance, I think it was actually a really good weekend for Max.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think a lot's been said, Red Bull's regime is over, but actually this was the better Red Bull we've seen over the past couple of seasons at this track. So I if I was them, I would be actually pretty happy with the weekend. Because if they can get it to work here, and we know that's kind of been the downside of that car. If they've found some kind of solution where they can find it to be decent pace and, work at this track, they might come back to the next track with a lot closer competitor to the McLaren car, I feel. Everyone's talking a death knell of Red Bull. I don't think it's over. McLaren have an advantage, I think, more with their driver lineup. They definitely have a car advantage, but their driver lineup is showing, exacerbating the negatives for Red Bull, I guess. Right?
Yeah, I think so. And Red Bull is coming with some pretty significant upgrades in Austin, I think, in 3 weeks' time. So, in the broadcast, I think Ted Kravitz had mentioned that it was there are significant upgrades that they think will solve a lot of the issues they've been having, or at least get them back on the right track. So we'll see. But I don't know that it's. I don't know that the team. They may have root rot, but I don't think the tree's fallen over yet.
No, I mean they did beat everyone else except Norris. Right. So not all bad on their side.
Right. Agreed. Checo had a decent start, lost a spot to Colapinto during the pit stops. He managed to make his way back up to P10, put some passing on, and got back up to P10 for a point. So there you go.
Not good enough.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Not good enough, damn it. Not good enough.
Yeah, not good enough. Yep.
Not even close.
Agreed. After what he had performed, what he did at Baku, to go challenging for, at worst, a podium finish.
Yeah, I mean, no offense to Colapinto. I mean, doing a great job, but Sergio needs not to be looking back and saying how good that guy is. He needs to just take quick work of him.
Right.
You know?
In a Williams.
Yeah.
Right.
In a Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's talk about Mercedes. You got Lewis Hamilton P6, George Russell in P4. On Friday, I thought Merck looked in trouble. On Saturday, they qualified very well. But to be fair, I think that was more down to Ferrari stubbing their toe in qualifying than it was Mercedes finding some sort of significant setup change that made them come on song on Saturday. When I saw the results initially before watching it, I thought, wow, they made some serious changes and they're on pace here, because Friday they looked to really be struggling. But when I watched qualifying, figured out it was a red flag with Carlos's crash and all that.
Right.
Just kind of happened out, and I think they kind of backed into that qualifying result a little bit, because both cars struggled on both sets of tires. And George, as I mentioned, was critical all weekend about the inconsistency of those tires of each set, in between each set. But for Lewis, he started on softs, and there's a lot of people perplexed, Paul, about why they did that with Lewis. And it's like, oh, they're just screwing Lewis over. I think the reality of it is, if you consider the move was actually made in order to give Lewis the possibility of jumping Max at the start.
Yeah.
And had that worked, Lewis being on the softer tires, knowing that they struggled with both sets of tires during practice, if they could get him on softer compounds, get that track position, and then try to defend it, those softs might have worked to defend and hold Max off. But unfortunately, Lewis didn't get that jump on Max. Max was able to hold him off. Now, you could argue, though, maybe rightfully so, that they boxed him too early. Because it left a lot of work for him to do.
He certainly felt like it.
Yeah, he definitely felt like it was. I guess my counter to that would be maybe, but he didn't do any better on the hards.
Yeah.
Even when they did put him on hards, it wasn't like he was gaining hand and fist. So if they'd have waited longer and put him on hards, I don't know what would have been gained. I don't know.
It's hard to say. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it was a disaster by any means.
No.
Honestly. And you've got to try something.
Yeah.
You have to sometimes just do something a little different to try and eke out some kind of different result. And that's what they did. It wasn't a crazy idea. But, maybe optimally he lost a few seconds by the end of the race. But all good, I think.
Yeah, I think they were trying, like you said, trying something different. Because George, he had the right combination. Went medium hard, but he wasn't able to hold off Piastri for the final podium spot, and he settled for fourth. So, at best, you could argue maybe Lewis, had he been on that, he'd have been in that fourth, fifth place regardless.
Right.
But
no one's there to come fourth or fifth, right? So
nope, especially not Mercedes. Nope.
Yeah.
Understood. Let's talk about Ferrari, shall we? You had Charles Leclerc in P5, Carlos Sainz in P7. I think Saturday's self-inflicted wounds really made this a tougher weekend than it might have been otherwise. And I know, I'm a Ferrari fan, and I'm trying not to be biased about this, but I kind of believe this. Once Carlos crashed in Q3 and Charles had his lap deleted in Q3, this left them a lot of work to do on Sunday to get back up to the front and race. I do think Charles was stuck behind Hülkenberg and Alonso early on. He was not happy with that situation at all. That long stint. Ultimately, then, when he got in and got the fresh tires at the end, he managed to pass Lewis, but couldn't get to George. And I'm thinking, could be wrong, could be the fanboy in me, but I kind of feel like Charles and that Ferrari had more pace in it. I think that Ferrari could have beat Max had they not had that issue on Saturday. Had Charles started on the first or second row, I think it was game on.
Yep. I agree, actually. I mean, the pace he showed at the end there, I think that was the true pace of what that car probably had once he was out in clean air and he was able to chase down Russell. He obviously didn't get to beat him in the end, but at least he was able to drive fast. But yeah, it's just so tough that first, I say, the first third half of the race, they're just trundling around, and they don't want to try something different. They don't want to do an undercut because everyone's underpaced, so everyone's a little more bunched up, kind of like the Monaco effect. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So it's just, something needs to be done to change that dynamic of the race.
You know, you bring up also a good point, because you start to see these pretty significant gaps occur between pockets of cars that were running nose to tail, you know? And it was kind of it, because on the balance of it, look at all the previous races, you know, you weren't getting 14 and 16 second gaps between these two cars and the following two cars, or, you know, Lando pulling out, 18 seconds over Max, and then there's 7, you know what I mean? It's everybody's driving to a lap time to conserve or burn fuel and to conserve or manage the tires. And when you're doing that, it kind of gets this sort of effect, which isn't the most exciting racing, unfortunately.
No.
Yeah. Carlos stopped early and undercut a few drivers that gave him back track position, so he was able to fight his way back up to P7, which was good. It was a weekend of, in my opinion, missed opportunities for both of them. I'm not suggesting they could have won, but I do think the pace was there for P2 with Charles, or at least a really good battle with Oscar for P3.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll down in P14, Fernando Alonso in P8. This is sort of in my mind, a hidden gem of the race. Fernando did a fantastic job, and because it was a quiet race, I think he was pretty much overlooked. There was no TV time, no nothing. You didn't hear much about Fernando. He put in a great in and out laps to jump Hülkenberg. And I honestly believe, given where Lance was and has been lately, this car, in all honesty, this car is probably only interested in about a P10 finish, you know? Yeah. And Alonso demands a hell of a lot more from this car and somehow manages to make that happen. I can't help but think that, what might have been if he was in a competitive car, but he has a penchant for leaving teams just before they get good. I don't know how he does it, but it does. But I think I don't want to overplay it, but I just think it was a really good drive for Fernando.
Oh, it was an exceptional drive for him. Yeah. That car, I don't think they came up with any big upgrades for this race or whatever, but he just, I mean, the Alonso factor is always a factor.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we question how long he can keep his motivation up driving a mediocre car. But he's just such a competitive person. It doesn't seem to. It does affect him sometimes. I'm sure it does. But wasn't here when there's a little hint of an opportunity. I think he latches onto it, and it gets him back in the Alonso mode again.
Maybe signing Adrian kind of booed him a little bit.
That's gonna lighten your step, I would imagine.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Because Adrian said, I always wanted to work with Lewis or Fernando, and now he gets to work with Fernando, which is good. Yeah. Let's see. Lance started on hards, hoping he went for a long first stint, hoping for a safety car that never showed up, and then drifted down to P14. So, not a great weekend for Lance.
No.
Enough said.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on. Shall we? Let's move on. Haas, F1, Nico Hülkenberg, P9, Kevin Magnussen.
Sorry, I have one thing on.
Yes.
The paint job on the Merc, that was a very bad idea.
Yeah,
I kept thinking
confusing.
There's 4 Astons out there. It was so confusing. I get it's their sponsor color and everything, but boy, come on something different.
Man, that's Aston's color. That's their team color.
Yeah, just
go back to Predator Gray, like Ron Dennis liked.
Right, something like that. Yeah. Anyway,
let's see. Kevin Magnussen to DNF. Another great weekend for Nico. Again, very much like Alonso, I would argue. I just think it was a great weekend. Yeah, the red flag, like Mercedes. Maybe he got a little flattered by the red flag in qualifying, gave him a good, but he set the time.
Yep.
He set the time, and he was there, and great qualifying, had a good pace during the race, managed to run in the points pretty much all day. Some good battles, too. Had some good battles, and he held everyone behind him for that first stint. So there was some really good defensive driving, some good battles, got aggressive. He dropped a spot to Alonso in the pits, and both Ferraris were just fast enough to hold on, but he still came on P9. So
I would liken his drive to equal to Alonso. Quite honestly,
I would too. Mm-hmm.
I mean, really punching above your weight.
Yeah, in a car that's disinterested.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, but I think they've done a great job with it. I mean,
much better.
Yeah, I mean, I think this car is like the second best car that's, apart from McLaren, who retrieved themselves on the back row.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the biggest turnaround out of any of the F1 teams over the past couple of years, because they were a joke in the race. McLaren, didn't have a lot of pace, but in the race, didn't matter where Haas qualified, they were going to the back by the end. But they kudos to them for solving those issues, and the rewards are the points they're scoring now.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, Kevin touched that wall. I'm thinking, I haven't read, maybe it damaged the wheel, but he got that puncture. Took him forever. He was on the opposite side of the track. Took him forever to get back to the pits, and they DNF'd the car. So it was unfortunate. Yeah. Wonder if they'll give him a penalty for causing a collision with a wall. Just to start that tally back up.
Yeah.
We're just going to run him out of the sport. Let's see. Let's talk about Williams. You've got Alex Albon, a DNF, and Franco Colapinto and P11. As much as I like Alex, and I do, he may be having his own Oscar Piastri issue over at Williams as we speak, as he yelled on the radio about Franco dive bombing him at the first corner. But Franco was really nowhere near him. Carlos was closer to him than Franco was. Yeah. I went back and watched it a few times, and they were on opposite sides of the track, and it wasn't until they got through the apex that he drifted over, but Carlos was in between him and Alex. So I don't know what Alex was upset about. He was probably
no one likes to get passed
by their teammate,
by their two race old teammate.
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe that was more of what you were hearing on the radio than a legit criticism, because I think the move was on. It was a great move.
It was
Franco.
A great move.
He shot the gap. He was up in the points briefly. Franco had a great race, only missed out on a point when Checo got ahead of him during the pit stops. And while Franco tried to fight back, he came on after the race and said, "Sorry, guys, I couldn't get to him." And he said, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, he said, I was really trying to push to get to him, but then it just didn't feel comfortable. And I think his point was he felt like he was getting over the edge. Where that car would take to try to fight.
Wreck it.
And he didn't want to risk wrecking it.
Right.
But that's a heads up move, right?
It is. I mean, he knows the position the team's in also, right? Financially, licking some wounds from some bigger crashes earlier in the year for sure, financially.
Yeah.
And it is a heads up move, and you got to know when to fold them, and that is maturity, beyond his experience right now, I would say. Because, I mean, you see some people in there, and I mean, like Antonelli, right? I mean, he throws it into the wall, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, but at least he was giving it a go." And these are the things you learn. Yes, but
that's a great point.
It's better to bring the car back in one piece. You know, especially with the limited budgets and everything. So I think it was a great move. It takes a lot to be able to brake. I mean, the biggest thing that anyone says is, the braking performance of a Formula One car just blows everyone's mind when they go to test one. And to then be able to outbrake the people he did in the turn one on the cold tires, and not lock them all up and become the first lap nutter, that we've seen before. I think was very, very impressive.
Yeah,
and it just kind of continued on throughout the race. Think about who his company was throughout the whole race.
Yeah, who he was racing against. Is really impressive. I'm like Martin Brundle. I will admit, Martin said this guy was nowhere on my radar.
No, me neither.
And Williams brought him up, and I was like, oh, okay, we'll see how this goes. And my gosh, he is definitely, he doesn't have a seat, and he is definitely. If I was Sauber, I'd be giving him a call.
I absolutely would.
I'd call James Vowles and say, "How about you put him over here?"
Yeah,
we'll run.
It's as I said, he came in with no hoopla. Some other people have come in with a lot of hoopla and maybe didn't even do anything to warrant that. And it's been the surprise of the season for sure, because no one even knew his name.
Yeah. He'll still have some moments, no doubt about it. He's young.
Yeah.
There's only a couple races in it. He'll have his moments, but I think on balance you can see it. There.
Yeah, I mean, in car you see it. He's got confidence and car control. Honestly.
Yeah.
And then after that, you hone that more, and then you get to understand how to maximize a Formula One car and how to run a Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And so I just see a bright future for sure.
Yeah. Alex had an overheating issue, some sort of debris, maybe a bag or something. His initial thoughts got in the air intake and overheated the engine and had to retire the car. So unfortunate for him. Now we're down to a talking point, Paul. We're going to talk about RB. We're going to talk about one Daniel Ricciardo.
Yes.
Dan Ricciardo, P18, Yuki Tsunoda, P13. Dan started on softs like Lewis. It didn't work out either, but the team boxed him late to give him a consolation prize of fastest lap of what many believe is his last race in F1. Before we get to Daniel, let me cover Yuki and then we'll get back to Dan real quick. Yuki had a bad start, lost places, never really looked capable of climbing back into the points. And, that was P13 is about the best he could do. Now, let's talk about Dan. Many are dogging Red Bull, saying that the way that they've handled this with Ricciardo, this Ricciardo issue is really bad. And I understand the criticism of what they're doing. Here's my take.
From the outside.
From the outside. Yes. Yeah. Here's my take on it. But I'm curious what yours is, Paul. I suspect this is all to do with Checo and Red Bull. I'm inclined to think that they weren't willing just to throw Liam Lawson into Checo's seat for next year. But getting Dan's seat for the balance of this season lets them run him and see if he would be a good candidate for Checo's seat for next year. And so if he could, get into Dan's seat and they can test him out. If Liam does well, then possibly they move him to Red Bull to fill Checo's seat. And that leaves an RB seat open for them to fill. Right. I said it last year, and I think you and I talked about it. I said it last year that they should have put Liam in that seat and not Dan. And I love Dan. Don't get me wrong. Dan's awesome. But I said I would have put Liam in there before I put Dan or Yuki. And as a matter of fact, I probably would have kept Dan, and I probably would put Liam in instead of Yuki, if I'm honest.
Yeah, right.
Because
there's
I think
underlying things keeping Yuki on the team.
Yeah, there's underlying issues that are keeping him there. But if there weren't, I would have kept Dan, because I think on balance, when the car's capable and the car's having a decent weekend and they get the setup rights on those cars and the track's flattering him, he's there or thereabouts with Yuki. If they're going to score, if they're capable of scoring points, I think Dan will as much as Yuki would. So I would have kept Dan and put Liam in this year, and that didn't happen. So it's unfortunate about Dan that there's no swan song. A lot of people saying, this is just terrible the way that Red Bull's treating him. And after all he's done for Red Bull and blah, blah, and I think, well, like what? Leaving the team?
Yeah.
They didn't know he was going to leave. He just up and said, nope, I'm off to Renault. See you later, suckers.
Yeah. I mean, they gave him a lifeline.
Yeah.
He thought he was done 3 years ago.
That's exactly what I thought. And people were saying, after all he did for Red Bull, Red Bull, he left him in a lurch. Yeah. And then they threw him a lifeline, letting him come back into the team. And they gave him the ride in RB. And I kind of feel like, he's had a chance at RB to really kind of turn that all around and everything. So I don't disagree with it.
No, I mean, take your favorite football team. If you're a football fan, your quarterback's mediocre, making mistakes, not doing it, you're losing games.
Yeah.
Do you just leave him in to be, he's a good guy. We'll leave him in. No, people are shouting and screaming at him, right?
Yeah.
And it's a sport. It's a business. It's a sport. There's a lot of money on the line.
Yep.
This isn't, kindergarten.
Right.
Where everyone's getting a rosette and everyone needs to be kind to each other, because they're not going to be. I think they did give him a lifeline, and I think it was very, and it was based on some data they got. He went and did tests and this, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But at some point, you got to think about the future, and you don't just hold on to people just to be kind. It's just, I mean, they were, and we don't know what conversations they're having anyway.
Yeah, right.
Behind the scenes, maybe they've given Dan they've agreed on certain parameters he has to meet to be able to keep his seat. But the big picture for them is that they need to evaluate Lawson. And yes, we've seen what he did.
Yep.
But now, how long ago was that?
Yeah, a year ago.
Right. And it's like, it could be different. That could have been an anomaly. And you're right. They have to see what they're getting in order to reconfirm, because it has been so long, reconfirm that Lawson was the guy with the potential that we thought we saw and what they thought they saw.
Right.
And this is literally the only way they can do it.
Because in my mind, Paul, barring whatever underlying anchor that Yuki has in the contract or tie with Honda or whatever it is, the way I view it, Red Bull's got 3 seats. They've got Checo's seat and both RB seats, in my mind, certainly for next year. And they got to figure out if Max doesn't leave. There's all the talk about Max, having exit clauses and he could leave from Mercedes or whatever. And maybe that happens. I don't know. But in all, I understand why they're doing what they're doing. And I think they're doing what's best for the team. I think when they threw Dan a lifeline, I think they were doing what's best for Dan, to keep Dan in the sport. He's loved by fans. I think the Red Bull organization loves him. I don't know. They haven't even announced it yet, but they may have him as their reserve driver.
Right. I mean, they could turn everything around and say, okay, we're going to put Dan in there and take Sergio out. I wouldn't even be surprised at that, quite honestly.
Yeah, who knows?
I mean, I think the fastest lap thing was really about taking a point off Norris in the Drivers' Championship. Of course. I mean, that was like a nice aside, I suppose, but I don't think for Dan's career, I don't think he gives a two hoots about that.
No, right? They couldn't do it with Checo because he was in P10.
Right.
He had a point on offer, so you're not going to do that. So Dan's out there, let him get fast lap, and if Max wins by a point, it was brilliant.
It was brilliant, right?
Yeah.
So I certainly don't fault Red Bull for what they're doing if they're going to do it.
Yeah.
I think they definitely need to do something.
Yeah, for sure.
I said I think Checo's just not cutting the mustard, so he should be replaced at the end of the year, if not sooner.
Yeah.
But that being said, once again, it's really hard for teams to take the big risk and throw Lawson in amongst the constructors and drivers battle.
Yes.
Right? They know Checo kinda. He maybe is disappointing, but
he's a known element.
Yeah, I personally would have moved Ricciardo into that role because I think Ricciardo would still perform better than Sergio. Maybe not as good as Lawson, but then also don't throw Lawson in amongst the
I agree.
the Lions.
I agree. They probably could have done a double shift earlier this year with Dan into Red Bull and Liam into RB.
I think so.
I think, or if they didn't want to, I thought it would have been worth just swapping Checo and Dan for a couple of races and see how that goes.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about Alpine, Pierre Gasly, P17, Esteban Ocon, P13. Not a lot to talk about here, guys. I don't have a lot of notes.
Let's get the gloves off and really dive into this.
Let's dive into the details. Okay, let's go through the lap times. Lap 1. There's just not a lot to talk about here. And I wish there was, don't get me wrong. So let me sum it by saying this. Pierre ran long first stint, hoping for a safety car. That didn't come. Esteban was on the same strategy as everyone else, but neither strategy really could get him in the points. That's about the end of the story. And then equally for Sauber, not a lot to talk about here. He had Valtteri Bottas in P16, Zhou Guanyu in P15. Both were on the same hard-medium strategy, but neither can make any headway against those that were ahead of him. Having said that, Joe said he felt it was a better race because it suggested they can fight better with those around him with heavier fuel loads. So he thought that was a positive. He also said that keeping Valtteri in his DRS allowed Valtteri to stay ahead of Pierre Gasly. So he was proud of himself on that. So there you go.
Yeah, got to have something.
Got to have something to look forward to. Okay, let's give out some awards and then we'll wrap things up. The first award is always Move of the Race.
Seriously, Todd, stop yelling at Todd.
This is just my opinion, man. Paul, would you have move of the race?
I got cool-toed on Lando at the end of the race there. There wasn't a lot to choose from, but I thought that was the most unexpected move of the weekend, quite honestly.
It was very, very, very DC. I love it.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. You wouldn't, you, me, and DC, we're all Scottish. We should all go out and have a beer. He would be hilarious to talk to, would he?
He's a very smart guy.
Can you imagine the stories he's got?
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Those would be hilarious.
Yeah.
I just see my move of the race. I had Franco Colapinto at the start. I thought it was brilliant.
It's a big thing. We didn't really talk about it when we talked about them, but he's got nothing to lose for being courteous to Albon.
No.
He doesn't have a ride next year. He doesn't have a ride. No. Yeah. It should be, and appears to be, all about him and what he can achieve in a race. And it should be. Yeah. And that's what Formula One drivers should be like, and that's exactly what he's doing. So I think that move typified what he's done when he arrived. He saw, this opportunity came from absolutely nowhere, and he's grabbing it by both hands.
Yeah. Chuck Yuki and put Franco at RB with Liam next year. That'd be a great driver lineup.
That would be a good lineup.
That'd be good.
You're just trying to get rid of Yuki.
No, it's not. But he's been in there long enough for, I think, everyone to see whether he's a viable candidate for the Red Bull. I don't think he is.
He's not. No.
I like Yuki a lot. Personally, he's funny and but I get it. But, from a team perspective, I'm just being draconian about it. Is he a legit replacement for Max or Checo at Red Bull? I don't see that.
No.
I think what Christian said, and Toto said he's just stirring the ship, but I think what Christian said, hey, we'll look outside of the pool. George's contract is up. I think that'd be a much better pickup for Red Bull.
Yeah.
George Russell, sign me up. I've said,
no kidding.
Years ago they should have put him in instead of Valtteri, and they didn't. And now, even the last couple of years, I've felt like the team is never really around George. Right. Even with Lewis announced he's going to Ferrari, I feel like he's still around
Lewis just literally needs to not be there anymore for them to change their attitude.
I know. And then I thought, well, when Lewis finally leaves, they'll throw a little love. George, nope, it's Kimi Antonelli now.
Yeah.
I think, if you don't like George
Toto has
his
Kimi Antonelli T-shirt under his white starch shirt. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm overreacting, but I can read body language and I can read what they're saying about each other. And the way I look at it is it's like Honda and McLaren. If you don't get love over there, go to Red Bull. They made it work. And I think if Red Bull picked up George, I think he'd be daunting over there. Mm-hmm. I think they'd make it work, And I think George would be loved there, I really do. Yeah. So anyway, that was my next award is Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live.
All right, Paul.
I'm going to give it to the race length. I kind of went over that a little bit. I think what you're picking is the rightful champion for this by far. But I had to try to think of something that was playing on my mind during this race, and I think the race length could be shortened, make it a little more spicy.
Yes, my donkey of the race was the FIA Sweargate, as I call it. It's just such a Look, trying to reduce the amount of foul language to make it more family-friendly broadcast, that's a noble charter by anyone's measure. That's fine. I get it. Maybe you could do some penalties. You could ask the teams to work with their drivers, try to tamp down on that, right? Yeah. I get it. Does the foul language offend me? No. It's the heat of battle. Just drivers say what they say. Am I offended? No. But I understand the sentiment, right? Mm-hmm. If you've got a bunch of young kids that are watching this, you'd rather not have Yuki F bombing every 20 seconds with your your 9-year-old there. I get it. Yeah. But on the flip side of that, the way that MBS presented it was so ham-fisted and so ridiculous that he created
odd for him to do it that way.
Yeah, he created a controversy where it didn't need to exist. Yeah. But like his ham-fistedness, then what does he do? He comes out and makes this big proclamation that, this is swearing and we're not rappers and all this crap. And then Max says something in a press conference on Thursday, we're going to make an example of my new rule and we're going to penalize him and make him do community service. It was just so ridiculous. Yeah, even Lewis said, I hope Max doesn't serve the community service because I sure wouldn't. Yeah. Because it's ridiculous, There's no doubt that many of the drivers won't even be around MBS or shake his hand. The teams don't like it. This is, in my mind, it's time.
Please.
FIA's got
where's Ari Vatanen when you need him?
I interviewed Ari Vatanen, and he's a great guy. And something's got to change there, guys. This is ridiculous. When none of the teams respect this guy, he's on the podium, and his big job now is always directing people where to go. And then he's at the weigh-in, like he's personally weighing in Lando after races. Do you have someone that can do that? Are you the president, or how does that all work? Is that in your job description? Shouldn't you be talking about road safety? And that was Jean Todt ended up doing. Come on, man.
Yeah,
it's crazy. All the best to you, MBS, but come on, man. That was mine. Let's see. The final. Oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something? Okay.
No, I was not.
Did I rant enough?
Yeah. Boy, you really don't like him.
No, well, that's what I'm at. Is this what the hell? Come on, guy.
Yeah.
It's time to, wake up.
It is.
Be professional.
He said, I thought it was good because he said he was going to stay away from Formula One. But
that's what I thought.
He's back.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And, quite the contrast, though. And not to get on a soapbox here, but I just spent the weekend over listening to IMSA, and there's things you disagree with IMSA about. And there's, of course, there's BOP and other issues and rules or regulations, or they give penalties for this and they didn't for that, or consistency. I'm sure there's lots of reasons that you've disagreed with IMSA. But they haven't come out and just been so ham-fisted ridiculous as this. I listened to them over the race weekend. I read their press releases during the weekend. There's a professional organization, and they managed it well.
They do. And the good thing is, these kind of discussions happen not in the press.
Yeah, they shouldn't.
Right. I know, obviously, IMSA doesn't have the same eyes on it that Formula One does, but it's reasonable. You can have reasonable conversations for the most part. Sometimes not, but, but for the most part, a lot of stuff can happen, just having a discussion between the weekends or during the weekend. And, okay, well, here's my idea. This is what you said. This is what we think could, and in the end, it's usually pretty amicable.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
It's all part of being reasonable.
Just be professional. Let's see. And finally, we have Drive of the Race.
Get down. Get down.
Get in there, Lewis.
All right. I was talking to, I can't name names, but I was talking to someone who works in the media in London.
Okay.
And he was talking about Lando.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, it looks like, the British fans got a new hero. And I said, yeah, it's kind of interesting because as a Yankee watching the British fans, they just can't let go of Lewis. They're just clinging to Lewis. And it just boggles my mind, because how could you not be excited about Lando and George and Ollie Behrman and the future of British presence in Formula One? These young drivers are fantastic,
Yeah.
And they just, and then he said, I was never a Lewis fan. So I think it's great. It's time to that Lando showed up. So, yeah. So contrary to popular opinion, folks, if you're not British, not all British fans love Lewis Hamilton. Who knew? So there you go.
There we go.
Drive of the race, Paul. Who was it?
I'm going with Colapinto. As I said, choice. He was running so well, and the company he was holding, and he didn't make a mistake. He got to the finish. He didn't get points, but he came awful damn close. I think
a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
great.
Impressive.
I picked Lando. I think it was a fantastic race. He was on it all weekend, just 10/10, and he did everything he needed to do. And it's good to see Lando kind of bounce back even after the whole papaya rules and Oscar thing. And I think he made a pretty clear statement with that one. Yeah,
sure.
Good. Yeah, I'm happy for Oscar, but just FYI.
Yeah.
Here I am. It's really good. It's good.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting how this evolves.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah. Sometimes. We'll see how.
We even talked about it. It was like they're all going to work together as a great team on their way up, but once they got there, then things change.
Yeah, it's like Nico and Lewis, right? Yeah, not so much. Although, kudos to Zach because he posted on social media, it showed a picture of him and Christian Horner on the same flight over. They were all buddies, and so I'm glad that they buried whatever hatch that they had between them. So Zach will fix it. He'll fix it.
He'll fix it.
He'll get it fixed. There you go. All right. Well, that does it for this podcast. Be sure to share your opinion. You can do that by going to theparkformay.com. Share your opinion on the website. If you like this podcast, give us some love. Give us a good rating on your favorite podcast player and share it with friends and family and people you don't know. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Be
down
judged.
Yeah, just post it on social media.
Have you ever heard of?
Yeah. I would say just post it on social media and be judged by others on your choice of podcast. Why not?
Yeah.
Put yourself out there.
Put yourself out there.
Yeah. So
you got a bit of my. We met a few podcast people while we were there, right?
Yes, we did. We met a few podcast listeners. So thanks for stopping by. That was awesome. Great to meet you guys. That was awesome. And thanks for listening. And a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters because we could not and would not do this podcast if it was not for you. And I'm dead serious about that. Why would I be podcasting for 17 years if I didn't have the support of our Patreon supporters? So huge thank you. And Gigi, the cat, I'm going to tell you, you need to get your daughter in that chair, in that seat. All right. In that drive. So you have to, Paul, you have to go look at my social media where he took his daughter to Singapore to the race.
Oh.
But you have to read that. It's pretty funny.
Okay.
Anyway.
I'll check it out.
So he's awesome. All right. Until next weekend when I go find Grace and we get her opinion on all this nonsense. And by the way, Grace is pretty proud that her fantasy GP team just overtook Paul in the rankings.
Oh my. She is. It's like
happy.
It's like Christmas in September for her.
She should be
happy.
She should be. Good for her.
Good. I don't know where she came from. She came from nowhere. She's like the Colapinto. Yeah, she's like Colapinto of the fantasy league.
Yeah, who knew she was Argentinian?
She was there.
Who knew she was Argentinian? I thought she was from Western PA. Who knew?
I know. Who knew?
Crazy. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, until next week when we come to do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Ned Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
I don't feel I've got to prove at all. I don't really want to prove anything. I started as an amateur with no idea or no intention of becoming world champion. I was curious to find out what it was like to drive a car fast, to drive on a certain circuit, to drive a certain type of car.